we're here talking to Dan Griffey, incumbent Republican running for state representative position number 1, correct?
Yes, absolutely. 35th District.
35th District. So most people know who you are. Let's tell everybody about you, what you've accomplished in your 2 terms.
Well, there's quite a few things I'm proud of. First of all, it is truly an honor to serve the citizens of the 35th District. I serve in many capacities, primarily as a professional firefighter, and I have for almost 27 years now as a professional firefighter. In Olympia, some of the bills that I'm most proud of is I ran a bill that would end the property tax structure for our senior centers, or nonprofit senior centers, and it allowed them to leverage quite a bit more money of their money to help their members and the things they do, Meals on Wheels and those sort of things. The money that the use that the state would have got out of that money is doubled or tripled for $60,000-$70,000 that they were able to save. So I really liked that bill. I worked on a bill that would provide free lock boxes for the purpose to lock up medical marijuana and prescription drugs to keep kids out of them. I worked on several bills on fire service annexation because it's an area of expertise of mine. The idea of being able to more easily functionally consolidate fire departments so you can get more bang for your buck. So I've worked on several bills on that. I met a wonderful lady, Casey Kasem's daughter. It was really neat to meet her, and she started talking about elder isolation abuse, and I was able to work with her and Representative Lori Jenkins, and we were able to get a bill passed that's going to strengthen our efforts on elder isolation abuse. It was tragic what happened to Casey, and I was really happy to help on that. I worked on a bill that was very near and dear to my heart that would PTSD presumption for firefighters and law enforcement officers. We all recognize that those that serve in our military could potentially and do suffer from PTSD, but I think a lot of people forget that our law enforcement and firefighters are subject to very severe traumatic events, and I was really happy to work on that bill. Worked on a couple bills with regard about growth management rules, and specifically economic development. And unfortunately, or fortunately, a bill that was my original concept and I ran for 3 years was passed in a Senate version, which was awesome. I showed up and the governor had vetoed the best component parts of it, but I will continue to work to make sure that we understand that the rural communities, Mason County, Kitsap County, Thurston County, we have different needs, different growth needs than they do in King County. So I could probably go on with what I've done, but
Okay.
That's kind of a sampling of what I've done in Olympia in my first 4 years.
So, I emailed you some topics I wanted to cover,
Yes.
and they're not specific questions. They're just some things that I've heard around the community involved. School funding and property taxes has been on everybody's minds because they see that big uptick in their property taxes.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were several school bonds that were approved right at the same time that we did the McCleary tax shift, and so there was a lot of sticker shock that people had with schools. We do have some tax relief planned, and we supported, myself and my caucus supported cutting that property tax impact in half. However, the majority caucus voted not to give those tax rebates back. You'll see stability in next year. One of the problems that we had to overcome was how do we fund the school policy from the day before McCleary fix and then the day after. Well, there was an overlap, and then that overlap, there was a little bit of a tax increase on your property taxes. You're going to see that tax increase kind of level out and lower, and it'll be for most of the school districts and residents that I represent. They will see a functional tax decrease. However, we had that kind of mix in the center where we had to fund both policies kind of simultaneously to get them off the ground. And so the good news is there should be a pretty good tax break for most of the residents of the 35th Legislative District when it comes to school funding.
When on the school funding, and I could be wrong about this, but part of the proposal is teachers' salaries based on school district sizes and
yeah, they called it regionalization, and it didn't work very well for us. I don't like the regionalization pay, and so basically what the regionalization was dealing with is it did local cost of living. So King County local cost of living would be a lot more, so they could pay them a lot more. The problem is they didn't factor in local cost of living in a rural district when, if you have to drive 25 miles to get to your grocery store and those sort of things. And I think you're going to see some more reforms to the McCleary fix. There'll be tune-ups, if you will, not major reforms or major policy shifts, but what you're going to see is it's really hard for rural districts to compete for the good recruit and retain great teachers with having this huge pay disparity in the King County area. So it is on our mind, and we are looking for a really regionalization fix. We were able to get a 12% kind of bump for a couple of our school districts in the 35th district. But a more comprehensive approach, I think, is coming.
Okay. Since we're staying with schools, let's talk about school safety. With the shootings and what have you, and some proposals have arming teachers. What are your thoughts?
Specifically on arming teachers?
Just overall.
Well, I think we need to go back to the beginning. We need to go back to the first modern history mass school shooting and look at what the commonalities are. And one of the number one commonality is somebody knew something. So I have a 3-point plan that I'm working on, and I'm trying to get leverage in Olympia to get the rest of my colleagues to get behind it. Number one would be to put a school resource officer in every school in the state of Washington. Some of the bigger schools, we would put up to two school resource officers, size dependent. And on top of the school resource officer, we want to deploy an app, so a cell phone app that would have kind of crisis buttons on it. Because going back, again, all the way to Columbine, somebody knew something. And if we could give our school students a tool that removes the barriers to reporting that we have found from all of the mass shootings, where they could just push a button and send a text. It's kind of the way that they like to communicate these days anyway. You can't hardly get the cell phone out of their hands, but it can be used much more for much more than just reporting suspicious activity or activity that needs to be followed up on. They could report bullying of themselves. The school could use it for any number of other activities. But I think it's important that app be an anonymous app, coupled with the school resource officers that we have in the building that are trained investigators and could do investigation leading with the evidence or the tools that they find on the app. I think we'd have a very robust a school safety plan. And number 3 on the plan would be our school design. And I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of new schools now have kind of the vestibule isolation entrance. And I think what we need to do as a state is establish best practice school construction or school design. If we couple all 3 of those, I think we're going to make significant strides towards improving school safety. And I can't say we'll ever eliminate the possibility of a child losing their lives going to school, but I think we could drastically reduce it with that plan.
Another topic, and this one I didn't, actually your opponent asked if we could talk environmental issues.
Yes.
Do you have, I mean, this may be a party thing, but where are you when we're talking about the environment and balancing everything else that goes on in the district?
Our district is ecologically diverse, and we have a lot of storm runoff issues. Right now, in the Hearst fix, I don't know if you've recovered the Hearst fix that much, but we have a significant responsibility to do watershed planning and wastewater runoff planning, and we are doing that. And kind of Mason County is kind of the ground zero when it comes to stormwater runoff. I think it is very important that the water that goes into the sound goes out into the ocean is as clean as we can possibly make it. I think it's very important that we protect our environment, and I think we need to do it smartly. And at this point in time, some of the policies that have been proposed through Olympia are problematic to me. Number one is they were trying, some of my colleagues wanted to push B80 diesel as an alternative to help the environment. That's how it's couched. The problem is B80 diesel gets about 20% less fuel economy. And so I do not understand how we push that, and is that going to be a true environmental fix? Well, I don't think so. I think what we need to do is we need to be pushing for policies that promote hyperfuel economy, and hyperfuel economy reduces the amount of crude oil we burn, thus cleaning up the environment. I've sponsored a bill for 4 years in a row to recognize hydroelectric power as renewable, so we don't have to import coal-produced power from the state of Montana, and I can't get traction on that bill, which is kind of ridiculous. But if we go back to the premise behind the initiative that first established our clean energy policy, it was billed that we had to build more wind and solar capacity. We've built more wind and solar capacity. As a matter of fact, all ratepayers right now pay a surcharge for to diversify the electric grid portfolio. And I'm proposing that we take a percentage of that and put into upgrading the turbines on the Columbia and Snake River to bolster our hydroelectric power generation. We think with a very small investment, we could see that our power portfolio get to 200 to 300% of current needs, and would have then no need to import any coal-produced power.
Moving on to one of the more social issues is homelessness. Do you have anything that you're working on to combat some of our
Yeah, absolutely. Issues? So zoning is a key. We have to zone areas of economic activity or low-cost housing activity. If we don't work with our local county partners to zone areas to build, we won't have any places to build, and that is definitely a problem. Mason County is projected, the whole 35th is projected to see significant growth, and if we're not zoning the property to build, we're not going to get affordability in the marketplace. But I'm working on tiny housing policies. I supported Representative Brian Blake's 4-year bid to establish a statewide policy on house sizes. I believe tiny houses can be put on foundations, and they can be built just like conventional buildings, and they could then be willed and deeded and those sort of things, instead of what we've seen kind of in the King County model, they're just kind of a shed put on a couple of cinder blocks. We can do it better, and to that end, we're working on the Senator Sheldon pushed through Veterans Tiny Homes plan, kind of as a test bed to see what that would look like. But I'm working on the problem of homelessness from several areas or several directions. We have to understand that we have a mental health issue that is hindering our ability to get everyone housed. We have a spending problem that is hindering our ability. We've spent billions of dollars, and usually in King County, over a long period of time on housing and homelessness, and we don't seem to be making any strides in it. We're going to fixing it. So I think if we look at some rural sensibilities and use our rural areas as kind of the driver for fixing the homelessness problem, we'll get more inventory. The inventory is going to be cheaper. Affordability would be kind of, especially if you invest in tiny homes, will be built into the final product. Who's going to pay $3,000 a month to live in a 300 square foot house? They won't. So you'll have intrinsically low cost housing. If the undergrowth management, the idea was we were going to see push most of our growth to the urban centers, and one of the problems that's worked, so we've overdeveloped our major urban centers in Washington State. So what we have to do is kind of move people back and allow the rural communities to kind of be that the overflow, if you will. Because we have land, we have a capacity, we have schools, very good schools. So I think the problem is very diverse, but I think if you break it down into very small chunks, it's not as hard to fix as some might think.
Dan, there's so much that we could talk about. I mean, I got a lot of more, but we want to kind of keep this in a small time frame. Last thing I want you to do for me is just tell everybody why we should re-elect you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the interview. I am very passionate, and I am very proud to represent the people of the 35th District. I'm a lifelong resident of the 35th District, and the reason I want to go back is I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started. My passion and my desire to serve and get things done for the 35th District is insatiable right now. I never stop. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning during session, and I probably get home at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just love it still. The reason I think they should vote for me is I never stop working for them, and I love each and every one of the residents of the 35th District. And yeah, I think I don't know why I'm getting hoarse now, but anyway.
Because we're done.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.